we've been taught that Africana Studies is a bullshit degree. We've been taught that it's not important. It doesn't help us get a job. It's not a nation building discipline. But nothing could be further from the truth. When Malcolm called for a liberatory education, when he called for us to explore every dimension of our people and our history, he was basically making a call for Africana Studies. Africana Studies is not just the study of our ancient history. It also includes the study of our history, culture, and politics of African people wherever we exist, regardless of land, label, or language. Who's going to teach our history? Who's going to use rigorous research methodology to explore the contours of our existence and our culture? Who's going to keep our cultural memory alive? Who's going to train future scholars and scholar activists? Those people are going to be your people in Africana Studies. So this includes people like Amos Wilson, John Henry Clark, Dr. Ben, Francis Cress Welsing. People who look at our history, culture, and politics and provide critique of oppression and blueprint to remedy oppression. And they do this specifically from a black lens, from a black perspective and point of view. This is why.
So I want to kind of clip it right there. Africana Studies. I like what he said. Being students and student activists. Mm-hmm. You know, because we big on using the information, but he's specifically talking about Africana Studies. I guess we would call it. I don't know what the three of us would call it, because we would. I guess the way we would present the information and look at it would be a building upon the Africana Studies. So it's still Africana Studies. I don't know. You know, we just want to call something. We want to build on it and call it. I don't know why we want to give it a new name. We ain't got to give it a new name. Africana Studies. Forget I said all that, but Africana Studies. But I do think this links back to our breakdown that we did about Robin Walker. That's the first thing I think about. And we talked about the importance of knowledge of self, and that's another way we can label it, knowledge of self, Africana Studies. But being able to use the historical information, to properly use the historical information, in addition to information about Black psychology or information about economics or information from any other area of human activity, but specifically the Africana Studies, because we know the history is important. Now, I guess I'm thinking 2023. I'm thinking using education for today, the new Negroes that we are today. Africana Studies or Black history or knowledge of self, that information is still very, in my opinion, still very, 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 very relevant today. But what's irrelevant is just sitting on the information. What's irrelevant is just you're happy to have the information. Of course, we repeated this over and over and over, but the clip calls for it. But that's the irrelevant part. Like I was thinking earlier today, it's not the knowledge itself isn't power. Applied knowledge is power. So when we get the information, how can we apply it? But also when the information is taught, it's the information being taught from an angle or a lens to where the students can receive the information in a manner that could spur them into action, rather than just in the manner of, well, I know this and I want to go share these facts. But student activists spurring that information, that is to me, that's one of the most important things that we need to be doing right now in 2023, is figuring out how to take proper action to change things, because that's the purpose of the information. If we're talking about liberation, if we talk about independence, if we're talking about freedom and the combination of all these things, using this information to really free ourselves, not just using the information just to feel good about it. I don't want to sound repetitive, so I'm gonna stop there. So I want to pick up on that.
You can take it back. Honestly, I think
Dang.
It was there, man. Anyways, honestly, I think in 2023, because of how segmented and stratified the world is, while at the same time globalized and all encompassing, I think we do probably need a new name for it just to put a new flavor on it for the younger generation. And when I say that, that's me fully understanding um, the connection and everything like that, but also understanding that because of what's happened over the years, there's been a tax placed on everything associated with Africana,
Yeah.
African, Africa.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes, and I'm in the space with young people all day. Um, they kind of want to steer away from that stuff. They love the information, but you can see that they're kind of off put by it. So I think something, if we could come up with something specific to black people here in America as a culture group, and then work our way back like we did with the Black History curriculum that we made for PAX years ago, start in the present and work our way back to teach them the connection they have to Africa and African cultures and things like that. But I do think a new name would be beneficial in getting this new younger generation of black folk on board with learning about themselves. Knowledge itself has become taboo. Black history has become pretty much everything for everybody but black people. Um, and I say that with the inclusion of intersectionality. And now they're talking about this whole queer theory, thanks to what y'all got going on down there in Florida. Like, it's kind of been the term Black history has been so watered down that it could literally mean anybody at this
It's our
point.
fault though. That's our fault because we let everybody take it and just do what they want with it.
I
And because we
understand. I understand and I agree with that, which is why I'm saying that's the tax we gotta pay. So I'm like, in order to avoid paying that tax, and I'm not saying we have to, I'm just saying it's something that need to be on the table. We need to consider coming up with a different name for whatever we choose to do moving forward educationally. That's all I'm saying.
okay, so I didn't sound crazy. Okay.
This is a tricky one because I get that in order to make it relevant for this current generation of or current era. I'm not even gonna say generation because I think you can go through all age ranges and pretty much have the same results. That short attention span, that inability to connect to things that people see as defeated. And when you put the term, you put the word Africa in front of something, black people themselves back away from it because they know that there's a consequence to it. If they accept it, they're going to have to face a consequence for it. And this goes back to previous conversation we had about culture being insulating and protective. So because we don't have the culture in place, there's nothing to protect them from the wrath that they're going to deal with when they associate with it. So even if it's not conscious, it's a subconscious thing for a lot of people today to reject anything tied to African centeredness. So I get that. But I think backing away from it sort of plays into the hands of somebody saying, well, this was weak anyway. I think the problem is we've been backing away from it for a very long time. This whole concept of being black, being black and being strong and African centered died in the 70s. It found a revitalization and with hip hop in the mid 80s, early 90s with groups like Public Enemy and so forth. But for the most part, that was short lived and then drowned out, with other forms of music that were used to sort of like become the new blaxploitation of black people. So, and I think that we need to find a different way, but a more efficient and effective way to be more unapologetic about what we stand on. But we can't do it the way we're trying to right now because it's ineffective.
Right.
And I'm not with doing things that's ineffective and inefficient. I know some people will ride this horse until it falls down, until it dies. But that's not going to, that's not going to work for us for the long run. So it's something that, and this is why I say we need think tanks, because something like this there needs to be a sophisticated study with resources attached to it to formulate a strategy that will get this into the mainstream of Black America in a way where it sticks, it suffice, and it is protective of those who embody it. So whatever, if it's the name, if the think tank comes up with a name, cool. If a think tank comes up with a different strategy, if a think tank comes up with a way to make this profitable, spiritually, culturally, as well as financially, because you don't have to be broke. You know what I'm saying? I think that's the way to go about it. But as long as we don't let it wither away, and as long as we don't allow for it to continuously be watered down, like Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, his March on Selma, the March on Washington, the I Have a Dream speech, or the month of February, which turned into a Hallmark card embracing all the things about Black people that America originally hated, but put it in a nice gift packed wrapping. You know what I'm saying? And re-delivered it, repackaged it for us to observe. You can now see that Black History moments at Walmart.
See, that's why I'm thinking. All right, I'm finna pull a page out of Pat book. All right, look, let's start. Let's set some new foundations. Let's define what education is for us moving forward, especially if we're talking about the mindset of independence and liberation. Let's define what education is, and let's define what culture is through those lenses, right? Thinking about, I believe I've heard Dr. Clark talk about it, and I heard Dr. Wilson talk about it. The education you receive should be education that could help you create independence, help you produce, help you build what you need for yourselves as a people, right? So we talked about it in the HBCU shows. We talked about it specifically colleges, but we just talk about the education that we receive, whether it's in school or in life. The total type of education that we receive as Black people is overall, it's not an education that's designed for liberation. Of course, we know the white man's education ain't no education for us that's designed for liberation. But even the education that we receive from ourselves, because of the Negro mindsets, it's education that we receive of destruction. And hopefully we find roses that grew from the concrete who can give us information that can help us empower ourselves. Because looking at the overall situations that we're in, just looking at how we receive information, how we give information, even how we go find information. Let's just be real. Most Black people don't give a damn about learning what we need to learn to free ourselves. Most Black people ain't interested in learning just basic stuff that they need for survival. Just act like learning how to cook is an issue. That's the basic survival thing.
But see, I don't even think is that they really recognize their ineptitude. I think we really need to spend some time on the societal, biological, and chemical warfare that's been taking place on the minds of these young people, their short attention spans, the inability to think cognitively, to critical think. That's real. If it ain't about being locked into a video game, they can't computate anything. So I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's like the student in the classroom who is a behavior problem, and is acting up and picking on students and bullying everybody, and then halfway through the semester you find out that they can't read or they can't count. And I think we have a lot of that going on in our community, where it's easier to pretend like I don't care about it than a lot of people saying there's a serious issue in regards to our cognition skills that there's not there anymore. And that's something that needs to be addressed, because I've read the reports about what happened in Flint. I read the reports about what happened in New York with their lead conditions. I read the report about what's happening now in Philadelphia, where we have a lead water issue that nobody's addressing, in terms of the fact that the lead count per million was higher in Philadelphia water than it was in Flint, Michigan at the worst time. You know what I'm saying? So we see all those things, Jackson, Mississippi, that we see the warfare that's taking place. A lot of times it has a lot of fallout that we don't talk about because we really can't see. It's hard to measure it. But one of the things people predicted that with Flint is you're going to see an escalation of violence once these young people come of age, because after a certain point, their ability to comprehend and their a level of confusion that it's going to cause is going to lead to them reacting more violently to situations than they would have in the past had they not been poisoned with that with the fallout from all that lead and toxicity in the water.
Hey, you want to know what could help us though? Proper education on how to be self-sustaining and self-sufficient.
I agree.
Proper education for liberation.
But the problem with that is, and it's instead of just tiptoeing around it, I'll be the bad guy. When you're dealing with people that have impaired cognition, right? Like we're talking about, because this is one of the fallouts of lead poisoning and
that's true. Environmental racism.
All of the environmental racism. We've been talking about it for years. And I think it's one of those subjects everybody's scared to broach, because nobody wants to be seen as that person that's calling Black people slow. But the fact of the matter is, and I'm not saying Black people are slow, I actually think Black people still being able to show the level of cognitive ability that we can show despite the environments that we've been placed in is nothing short of a miracle. It shows our ability to adapt and maintain. But we have to be real about the fact that we are not intellectually where we would be if we had not been in the environments that we're in. And for those of us that are in the worst of those environments, you can't come in there and talk to them like you would talk to somebody that grew up in the suburbs, out in nature, or in a well-to-do environment. They're not going to comprehend the same way. And I can say that because I deal with people on a regular basis that come from all walks of life. And as we're interacting with these children, there are clear signs of the environmental impact on their ability to comprehend the information that we're giving them. And you got to change the approach. And that's the thing that most people don't want to account for. And that's the reality. Now, that stuff can be undone, like you said, Joe, with proper education and proper support. But before we can start establishing proper education and proper support, we got to understand that there is a problem here with the ability of a lot of Black people to perform cognitive functions. And it's not their fault. It's the fault of the environment that they grew up in. But it becomes the community's fault when we fail to even see it and consider it as a possible factor that needs to be addressed.
Right.
Yeah, that part.
Right.
And I don't think you're a bad guy for identifying that.
No, we supposed, that's what we look. People, I read the comments. People love our honesty. I shout out to all my On the Shoulder Giant supporters. They love our honesty. We ain't trying to make friends like that. If we're gonna make friends, we're gonna make friends off of being honest. If your feelings hurt, this ain't the channel for you. All right. That's just what it is. But so you trying to say that educated people can't figure out how to get the information to the people who need the information. That's what you're saying, Pat?
Pretty much the way
Okay.
they can't understand it, the way they comprehend is not the same way that the people
So
in the lower rungs of the black community comprehend.
so you know what that means, right? Lack of proper what? Education.
Education.
And lack of proper understanding of the information that you have, because one of the tenets of, especially if you're a person that is disseminating information. Now I learned this 13 years of doing HIV/AIDS information, right? I have to take 17 and 27 letter words and give that to somebody who come from a lower educational realm than me. I'm known for simplifying stuff. That's how that's just how I think. That's just the environment I'm in. You can say something, you can say it in your most elaborate way and use all your SAT and all your GRE words and all that stuff. And I'm gonna come back and simplify it and make it simple. Because you have to understand the audience that's in front of you. You have to understand the people that you're trying to educate. And if you don't understand that, that means you haven't been educated properly.
Well, you
Hence,
also have the skill set of a master teacher, and a lot of people don't have that ability.
what they shouldn't be teaching.
I totally agree.